Hi, everybody. We're going to start with an introduction and project overview to Mission Ankur and the Mission Ankur Blueprint Report. Mission Ankur in Madhya Pradesh represents a groundbreaking initiative, and it aims to significantly enhance foundational literacy and numeracy, that is FLN, amongst the state's young learners. This project is aligned with NIPUN Bharat, with the NIPUN Bharat mission under the broader ambit of the National Education Policy 2020, and it aims to target universal achievement of FLN by 2027. The Mission Ankur Blueprint Report aims to provide a comprehensive overview of the initiatives and strategies employed under Mission Ankur, documenting the project's journey, its challenges, what the successes have been. It essentially serves as a blueprint for similar educational reforms across India, and it offers insights and best practices to improve FLN across the country. The report highlights key learnings from the implementation of Mission Ankur, and it reflects on challenges faced and the strategies that led to successful outcomes that it has had. It also emphasizes on the importance of collaborative efforts, innovative approaches, and the effective management strategies in achieving the objectives of FLN. By sharing Mission Ankur's pathways to success, the report aims to inspire and guide other organizations and education departments in India to undertake similar initiatives, contributing to the national goal of eradicating learning poverty and ensuring that every child achieves foundational literacy and numeracy. Before we move on, I'd like to introduce the authors of the report. The authors of the report are four. First, we have Kanchan Lal, who is the Director of Programs at TEA. She's been a key member of the Mission Ankur Project Management Unit, the PMU, since its inception and led the PMU from 2021 to 2023. Next, we have Dhruv Pandey. He's Director, Strategy and Learning at TEA and currently leads the Mission Ankur PMU. Next, we have Neha Kaktan, who is a project lead at TEA and has been with the Mission Ankur PMU since its inception in 2020, and she leads all academic initiatives. And lastly, we have Kunal Chaturvedi, who is also a project lead of TEA and has been with the Mission Ankur PMU since 2022 and leads specific governance and administrative initiatives.
Thanks, Varsha.
So now we will start with kind of speaking about the report, and what we'd like to basically do is kind of get to know the how, why, what of the report, and also a little bit of insight onto what Mission Ankur is and what are the strategies and initiatives that are outlined in the report. So I have some questions. So I'd like to start with Kanchan. And can you provide to us an overview of the Mission Ankur Blueprint Report and what are the key objectives that were behind writing this report?
Thank you, Varsha. It's a pleasure to be here to be talking about this report, which has been coming a long time. One of the objectives for writing this report was that very early on, we realized that the way the mission and the FLN program in the state was shaping up. And we've been working with the state on FLN program since 2019, which has seen a lot of ups and downs during COVID, with the mission getting launched at a national level, with changes happening both at the political as well as at the state level. It's been a long and arduous journey. And very early on in the first initial 2-3 years itself, we saw the potential of the program. Right. So it was always in the back of our mind to be able to bring it to a shape and form that becomes a learning experience for us, informs us of what we can do as an organization, as a sector, and also, of course, inform our decisions going forward. So if I just give you a quick overview of what the report aims to do, what's the objective of the report? The objective of the report is essentially to document the journey that we've had in the state on an FLN program that originated in 2019 from small interventions in the classroom to now when it has taken on a life of its own in a mission mode. And I think in a lot of ways, it sort of sets the tone for how education reforms need to be viewed in the country. So education reforms don't necessarily mean a program that is implemented for a year or in a certain district or with a certain stakeholder. It literally means the shape and form that Mission Ankur has taken, which is working in an extremely holistic manner, where you have the center bringing in budgets and setting the roadmap. You have the state taking ownership and contextualizing what it means. You have different elements in the state, whether it is the district, the state cadre, the principal secretary, the political leadership, adding to different elements of the program. And the way the external civil organizations like us and a lot of other partners have been able to pull into their knowledge and expertise to work in very close collaboration with the state to come up with solutions that are innovative, that set the benchmark higher, but are also very realistic and practical, that they can be achieved in such a large state as Madhya Pradesh. So really, this blueprint is a journey of what the design phase looked like, where we are right now, of what are the different elements that went into designing an FLN program. And not just an FLN program, I think, like I said, it's one of its kind education reform programs in the country that is happening. So it also sets the tone of how a statewide large-scale program should look like. And of course, there are a lot of reflections, insight, hindsight, wisdom that we've tried to capture on the report, which we feel will be a very useful tool for everyone in the organization as well as in the sector, to add on and to build in different places. And lastly, we hope that this report provides an impetus to the whole FLN mission, not just in the state, but also in the country and the sector.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. So speaking about setting the tone for educational reform in India, right? Once we've done that, right, work or are working on that, why is it important to create such a document of such a kind on a large scale project like this? And how did we do that, and how can we do that for our other projects? And Dhruv, if you could take this up.
Thanks, Varsha. I think Kanchan sort of touched upon this. Creating documents like the Blueprint Report helps us capture the nuance of what went into running a program at this scale, right? It's very difficult when you start breaking down such complex projects that have been running for close to 3 years, and you start breaking it down into its tiny bits and really try to understand, where did you start? What was that inflection point where you started thinking about the project in these 6 modules? What did those modules look like? How do you bring those modules to life, right, over a period of time? So I think what the report does really well, and why such reports are important, is that they capture the learning journey of any organization, of any program, of any project. And that learning journey itself can serve as a blueprint, which this is meant to do, but also as inspiration for other states, for other departments, for other civil society organizations to take such a mandate on. And really the goal is that, and the intention is that one does not recreate the wheel, right? If there is learning that already exists, if there is knowledge that already exists, we use it and we drive that. So there's no need for someone to then go ahead and say that, okay, I want to pick this up from scratch. Yeah, sure, you can do some first principles work, you can contextualize it, but the broader guardrails and the framework is in place. So that's really the intention behind creating such a report. I think the second part of your question was around what it takes to create something like this.
And how do you kind of start off doing this for other projects that we might have?
Yeah, look, I think it's imperative that we focus a lot. We talk about documentation, we talk about capturing insights, we talk about creating learning documents and learning journeys. But more often than not, what you really need to do is say that you want to create something very, very cogent, which is going to be which is high stakes. So when things are always kept low stakes, like, okay, this is a document, this is a learning document. Sure, you can do that internally. But when you want to create something that is going to be used widely, sector-wide, used by other civil society organizations, you really, really need to then put your thought and might behind it, right? So I believe that because we run such unique programs, spoken English in Tamil Nadu, SOSCs in Delhi, and there are multiple other initiatives that we're running across, right? It's very important that Once we reach that inflection point on these programs, we put in the effort to actually capture those insights and capture those learnings meaningfully, right? And I think it's simply about intent, right? Nothing more than that, right? Once you create that intent to write something which is going to be valuable, and of course, intent and content go together, that you have done this for enough period of time that now you know that you can speak to it meaningfully. So I'll pause there.
Right. No, that makes sense. So that gets us thinking on how does creating reports like this, maybe across all our projects, how is that relevant to the organization's, future growth, our sustainability as an org? Maybe I'd like to direct that to Kanchan.
Sure. No, so that's a great question, right? So partly Dhruv mentioned that, this helps us really think through the design pieces and what we were doing. So one thing was, and the most obvious reason was, of course, it gave us a forced pause to really think about all the things that we have been trying to do. Because when you are in really the deep end of the project, you are working on very minute operational details. You are doing day-to-day, month-to-month planning. But documentation like this really makes you pause and go back, to what I was calling as hindsight wisdom, to say at this time we didn't realize, but those were the important factors that played a role in, making things stay the course or in making certain decisions, etc. So it was a very important exercise for us as a team. And we got into a lot of ifs and buts scenarios of what if that wouldn't have happened, or if we need to create a backup plan for this. So I think just as a working team, it was a very useful exercise for us when we are in this 7 to 8 years long program, to take this pause every 2 to 3 years to say, what has gone well? How does that inform what we're doing right now and the future? I think on a larger scale, for the organization, like I was saying, that this is a great blueprint for an education reform. A lot of the principles and practices that we've tried to document in the report are not just true to FLM, but are true to systems in general. So if you talk about classroom material, right, the basic design factor that everything that affects a classroom transaction needs to be factored into the design. So it's not just about giving workbooks, but it's also about making sure it has got place in the timetable. It's also about making sure the teacher guide has relevant instructions, that there are necessarily TLMs available. So everything in that design element, same is true for assessment, same is true for monitoring. No matter what program you are doing, the design elements that we've tried to capture in the report will be applicable for all. So in that sense, I think that it's very useful for an organization to look at one program and be able to then reflect on its other programs and see if there are any cross-learnings possible. So I'm hoping that reports like these from all programs and all states every year will help us, strengthen those designs and programs. I think on a larger scale, and we've talked about this very often, because we as an organization believe in the power of collaborations, that NGOs, civil society organizations can't afford to come and recreate the whole wheel when they are working with state governments, right? We are just too small in the larger scheme of things to again fail and try the field experiments that have already been done in the other states. So for the sector to learn from each other, for states to learn from each other, and during the course of this program, we've actually done a lot of state visits to other states where FLM programs are going on. We've learned a lot from our partners who are working in other states. And vice versa. A lot of states have also visited Madhya Pradesh for what is happening in the program. So it's reports like these that will then, give that necessary thrust to cross-learning on what worked, what did not work, going through those different scenarios. So really for the sustainability of the organization, for the sector, for education reforms, problems that are as complex as mammoth as solving for foundational literacy and numeracy skills, I think documentation and discussion around it and cross-learning is really the only way to work on it.
If I can kind of have you continue from there, Now, what phase do you see Mission Ankur in today, and what do you see what shape do you hope to see Mission Ankur take in the future beyond today, and kind of what does the future look like for MA?
I can pick that one up.
Yeah, sure.
So I think Mission Ankur is, I think we're all aware, and we spoke about this in the report. It's at a pretty critical phase in a journey in terms of a lot of inputs have now hit the ground. Our teacher guides, our workbooks, they've been in the system for some time now. We are now looking to streamline some of the mentoring initiatives. We're looking to streamline our teacher professional development program. A lot of the tech is now getting streamlined in terms of the tech that's being deployed to monitor a program. So it's at a pretty critical juncture in terms of where some of the inputs that we put into the field are now seeing day of light in their truest sense, right? Like, the system is now used to these inputs. The system is aware and what we expect in terms of what to expect from these inputs and how they are supposed to be using it. So you essentially want to throw something out to the system gets used to it, the system starts using it, and over a period of time, as a result of that usage, you see some sort of difference, you see some sort of movement. So over the next 2 years, what we would like to see is really movement on those student learning outcomes. We've seen glimpses of that in the current assessment that was done. It's incremental. What we would like to be is a little bit more catalytic in terms of the incremental impact that we see on student learning outcomes. And our hope is as these inputs or so-called outputs, as they get stabilized, we'll see more of these outcomes come to life. So over the next 2-3 years, I think Mission Ankur is, Mission Ankur is, it's almost think of it like an exponential chart, right? Really, the hope is that the student learning outcomes start exponentially growing at this from here on now, because children will get more years of intervention, right? So grade 1 students will get actually grade 1, 2, and then 3, as opposed to when we started a couple of years back where every child did not get 2 to 3 years of intervention. So what I'm hoping for is that, we chart that journey on that exponential growth soon over the next 2 years, and really see how we can also integrate grades 1, 2, and 3 with 4 and 5, and also backward with the, early childhood, because that's important, right? It's a learning continuum. You can't say that if a child is not NIPUN by grade 3, well, too bad, that was your mandate, you wash your hands off it. So I think, and we're starting to think about those interlinkages between this entire spectrum, right? So really that's where we are right now and where the future lies for NIPUN and Mission Ankur in Madhya Pradesh. And it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But we truly now have, we've got a hold on what's happening, and we're confident about what to expect as a result of what we're doing.
So speaking of being on that kind of critical juncture right now in Mission Ankur, right? So was there any feeling of, okay, this is the right time to publish such a report for a project? And kind of what was the journey of seeing this report take shape?
So, okay, so I'll answer that very briefly. The right time, we felt it was the right time to look at this report because, like I said, a lot of the inputs that we were looking to create across these different work streams are now hitting the ground. So we had a lot of, tacit knowledge in terms of what we've created and how we've gone about creating it. And we have some proof of concept because we've seen movement on outcomes. So we believe this was a good point to take all our learnings and consolidate them and, send it out to the universe. So for similar organizations, for similar state education departments that might want to embark on the journey, this can serve as a useful tool. We had enough knowledge and we had enough acumen at this point in time, given that we've been at this for 3 to 4 years, that we knew that we knew what worked and we knew what it took to make it work, right? So far. If you were to ask me, will this report evolve in the next 2 years? If I were to write it after the next 2 years, maybe, some things might evolve and there might be some more learnings that come out about how you could introduce more efficiencies. But at this point in time, I'm pretty confident with where we are and, what the report represents as really a true hallmark of what we've achieved so far and what those critical, success pointers are. Well, if you do A, B, C, and D, there's a pretty good shot that you'll hit you'll sort of hit the bullseye, right? We're not 100% sure, but we're pretty sure. And I think that's where you want to be in most cases.
Right. No. So then speaking about the these initiatives, can we deep dive a little bit into the key initiatives that have been launched under Mission Ankur? And maybe if Kunal can throw some light on that.
Yeah, so essentially we looked at the entire program from two very distinct yet complementing lenses, right? So of course, when you're talking about student learning outcomes, when you are talking about things like focus on FLN, there you already have a set of directional principles or guidelines that have been issued by the central ministry in the country, right? And the first point or the core idea from where this entire change is to emerge from is a change in the teaching learning material and the pedagogy around it, right? So I think the first bit was to look at the entire program from an academic lens to really think about what are the changes that are needed in the curriculum, in the material, in the way that the teachers are teaching inside their classrooms. And of course, along with it goes the fact that you have to train the teachers on these new pedagogies and new material. You have to set in place a system of assessments that complements the way that the teaching is happening inside the classroom and is an effective measure to track student progress. So I think the first bit was really focusing on the academic initiatives, getting the curriculum in place, developing the material, training teachers, setting in place a system of assessments. The other bit was to look at it from a governance perspective, where you're really thinking about you've formulated or you've created what needs to happen inside the classroom. Now, how do you support or how do you enable the system to actually do it better, right? And how do you put certain systems in place that bring in efficiencies? So then you start talking about things like you need to have a system of one-to-one mentoring for teachers so that they're getting some kind of ongoing feedback on their classroom practices. You need to have in place a very robust data collection and monitoring mechanism so you can keep a track of what your inputs are, how are they turning into outputs. You need to enable a lot of decentralized decision making so that your districts, your blocks, your clusters are capable enough to take decisions and to essentially course correct in their respective unit of administration. And they don't necessarily have to depend on the state issuing very detailed instructions over and over again. To complement all of that, you need to have parents involved in the process. You need to have a very strong parental engagement strategy. You need to create a buzz amongst the general community, the general public around the mission. It's important so that there's buy-in from the ground. And there's a system of downward accountability that gets built into the system, right? So I think the second broad bucket of initiatives were essentially around setting in place some of these systems to support the teacher in delivering these practices, these pedagogies more effectively in the classroom, and thus contributing towards the overall goals of the mission. So two broad buckets under which we had 6 very distinct work streams. So there was TLM, teacher trainings and assessments under the academic side of things. And we had mentoring, monitoring and governance, and communications and parental engagement on the governance side of things.
Right. So speaking of, having all these 6 initiatives that are related but very different, I think something that Kanchan and Dhruv both touched upon is one of the core ideas of how Mission Ankur works well is different partners coming together in a coalition to contribute to the overall success of all of these initiatives, right? And Neha, being here from the very inception of Mission Ankur, can you throw some light on how coming together as a coalition has contributed to the overall success of this project and kind of what other programs can learn from working in this way?
Yeah, thanks, Varsha, for bringing this to light. I think reflecting back on the journey that we've had so far, I think the working in a coalition is one of the most important, one of the most critical pillars that I would say has contributed to our success, right? So in 2019, like Kanchan was talking about, I think 4 organizations with different but very complementary areas of expertise came together, with a collective ownership of this shared goal to improve FLN outcomes in Madhya Pradesh. And I think as the PMU leading this coalition, if I reflect back on the journey from the past 4 years, the coalition has really worked as a cohesive unit, right? And not just between ourselves, but along with the department as well. And we have been very lucky to also get a very fertile collaborative environment from the department side. under the leadership of Dhanraju sir. So all in all, it was a really, it has been a very cohesive, collaborative environment that we have operated in. And I truly believe I'm very confident to say that, we have been able to achieve more together than any of us would have been able to do if we were alone in this or as separate entities, right? So talking about, what this collaboration has really done for us, right? So if I talk about that, I think one thing that has definitely happened is that it has created this seamlessness in all our efforts, right? In the two major initiatives that we have between academics and the governance initiatives, that kind of seamlessness to all the pieces, all the different work streams talking to each other and having very, very direct linkages. The TPD program talking with the materials that we have, similarly with the assessments, and the mentoring is again very directly linked to all these, even at a micro input level, everything is very closely connected. Another very great thing that this has done is, I think it has strengthened the quality and the design of our program as well. And why I say that is because I think we have each and every partner. We have, like, from Room to Read, Vikramshila, Central Square Foundation, and us. We all have really played to our strengths. And while we come with different perspectives, different approaches, the fact that we operate with these shared values and this collaborative approach that we have on our shared goal, I think that really helps to put it all together, and we were able to play to our strengths in this process. And the perspectives that each of the partners gave in each and every work stream really broadened and improved the quality of our inputs. Because we had, for the same thing, we had different perspectives, and this really added on to the quality. In some contexts, yes, having diversity also has its flip side. It can lead to slow decision making sometimes. It can have clashes, but I think what really worked for us were these shared values and the goal that we still continue to operate with really well. And I think we have been able to reap the benefits of that collectively in the state. What really, I think, as reflecting on what really worked for us in terms of our actions, and like you asked, what is it that other teams who are probably exploring coalition or other states working on similar programs could take from it? I think I can share what worked for us. One was definitely, having very regular touch points on co-creating things, on problem solving, and just to even regularly interact with updates and what has happened. Right, this really kept us all together and built that relationship of trust and collaboration. Another thing that really worked was, having these periodic reflection points where we really took a pause, reflected on the journey so far, celebrated our wins a lot, and also learned from, our experiences, our mistakes, which have also happened. Like, it's part of the process. And I think we took this time to really engage with both of these and then constantly evolved in the process as we progressed from, year 1 to now almost year 4 that we are in. And part of this, I would say, is because of the nimbleness and the flexibility that all our partners individually as well as collectively operated with. So I think that is, I would say, is the most critical part, because if we operate with these elements, these values, that is when we would be able to, constantly evolve with the changes and the phases of the project as they have come about. So I think these three, along with many others, but these three are the most important factors which have, really built Mission Ankur as a team, as one unit that we all associate with instead of, our individual organizations.
Right. So once we kind of have the 6 key initiatives under our 2 broader buckets of kind of academics and governance, and we also have a coalition that has specific strengths but also shared values. Now, 4 years into the program, I kind of want to see what are the major challenges that we still face, especially thinking about the kind of scale that Madhya Pradesh presents in front of us. In that way, both from a academic standpoint and from a tech use governance standpoint, what challenges does that present to us on a daily basis, even 4 years in? If maybe Neha can speak about it kind of from an academic lens, and then we can have some insight on tech and governance from Kunal.
Okay, sure. So before jumping into the specifics of academic and governance, I think all in all, my reflections on the challenges of implementation of such a large scale program. I think for me, it's first, while talking about challenges of implementation, we cannot escape the challenges of designing for scale, right? That for me, I think is the first step. And designing an intervention for scale, I feel is, very different from designing, let's say, a small scale project or within a smaller unit. It has its own character, right? And there are lots of, and to be able to design an intervention for scale, it's very important to then first understand all the complexities of the system, which are a lot. Like, it's a really complex system. And to design for the last mile student and teacher, which is our ultimate goal, it's important to understand and really think about designing from each of the steps that lead up to it. And especially for a team like us that works at the state level, when we are designing anything for the last mile, it's very important to look at each and every step and how each of those smaller parts contributes to the whole. And to understand every potential breakdown that could possibly happen, right? Because even a very small piece could have cascading effects of a very large degree when we look at designing and implementing at this sort of a scale, right? For example, if I were to quote an example from our work, when we are designing, let's say, the workbooks and teacher guides for our students and teachers, it's important to also think about that design from the perspective of not just when a student opens and uses that workbook, what is going to help. That is definitely very important and something to consider upon, and what the teachers would want to look at, but also to think of when that book goes to print, when it is getting in the delivery process, the way that it's going to reach the process of development of that curriculum, the stakeholders who are a part of it, what each of those elements also bring to the design, how that affects the ultimate product, and what processes do we need to put in place for that. Even a very small thing of how the design or how the orientation of the book should be, or the order in which the chapters need to be, have a lot of implications in the larger pipeline. Similarly for teacher training, right? When we are thinking about the training design, is it just about, what are the best principles of training a teacher? Or is it also about thinking when a teacher training is delivered through a 2-level, 3-level cascade, what are the potential breakdowns and how do we address each of those to ensure that quality is maintained and the quality that is delivered at the state level reaches the last mile as well. So it's very important. I think the lens, what I'm trying to say is that the lens of designing an intervention itself is slightly different when we think of a large scale intervention. The second aspect, I would say, a learning in implementation is that, balancing this whole volume and scale along with the quality of delivery. So the examples I gave do touch upon this a little bit. So really putting in processes to check for quality and to also evolve in the process of implementation. So not to be very rigid in terms of what is our strategy for implementation and just to go with that, but also to see how that process is really going in a particular cycle as well as over the years, and to constantly keep evolving in that as well. I think it takes time to refine the processes, to really build capacity in the system, to learn from our experiences. So that is something that takes patience. It takes consistent efforts to go with that and to take everyone along. An example of that I would like to quote is after our first baseline assessment, we had a target setting workshop in the state where the functionaries of both academic as well as administrative units from the state, district, block, all of these levels, they were all invited to the state for a couple of workshops. And all these, it was kind of a first of its kind experience, even for all these different people across levels to come together to understand the results, to brainstorm on the strategies for improvements, to set their own targets. So what we learned from that was that everybody, when they got involved in such a participatory fashion, what happened was that it did not just put in knowledge in place in the system and worked on their capacity, but also, and most importantly, it created that ownership in each and every level and each and every stakeholder who's involved in the process. And that I feel is the most important part when we are talking about implementation at a large scale, at a large scale as our project is involved, because it's really important for every stakeholder in the process to be involved, invested, and to feel that it is their project, to have that sort of ownership. And that is one of the biggest strengths as well as a big challenge for us to navigate and work on. And I'm really proud to say that in Mission Ankur, as a coalition, we believe in this principle, and all our initiatives have always focused on building this kind of ownership, right from the leadership at state to the teacher and the student who's there in the class, and all the stakeholders in the line between that. Kunal, I would like to add some of your reflections to it.
Yeah, no, huge plus one to what Neha said. I think speaking from an overall perspective, the other thing that we are also constantly navigating is the government system, right? And these systems are mammoth, these are very complex, they're laborious to navigate. And they are, I mean, all of this is not dependent on the person who's helming it, right? Or the kind of people who are a part of that government system. You can have somebody with the best of intentions, with the best of qualifications, but by the essential virtue of it being a government system that is so complex and so laborious, often you are faced with delays, unexpected roadblocks, issues that come up in terms of approvals, in terms of sign-offs, in terms of implementation. So I think navigating that well and navigating it in a manner where you are trying to minimize the effect that these delays or roadblocks have on your project and on the implementation of the project is a constant battle that all of us are engaged in, right? And I think talking about a very specific initiatives, the NIPUN Professionals Program, where we have placed a very high quality resource at the district level, has kind of played a huge role in circumventing some of these challenges, some of these issues at the district level, right? Because you usually have a team of in that efficiency, that change into the system, but it's also equally important to catalyze the system at the district level, right? So I think that has been, kind of a good learning for us. Talking specifically about the governance and the tech side of things, I think, can you hear me? Am I still audible?
Yeah, Kunal.
Sorry, I just switched my video off. I think I have some bandwidth issues. Yeah. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, Kunal.
Yeah. So I was talking specifically about the governance and the monitoring angle. So when you talk about tech in the social impact context, usually one of the problems that you're trying to solve for is the problem of scale. Where the idea is to connect as many beneficiaries, as many people as you can through tech and kind of bring in that connectivity between the various stakeholders that you're working with. But in the context of education, and especially in the context of early education, you can't really connect your ultimate beneficiary, which is the child in a grade 1 or 2 to tech, right? So because they're not yet familiar with that kind of a system, it has its own pitfalls around privacy, safety concerns, all of that. So really you're relying on your last level of implementers, which is the government machinery, to play that role of bridging that divide between the system and the beneficiary, right, through tech. So in such a system where your one stakeholder, one implementer is responsible for looking after probably 1,000 to 2,000 kids, the touch points that you're able to provide for each student is a big challenge, right? You might bring in tech, you might bring in a lot of these new connectivity mechanisms, but at the same time, you are reliant a lot on the human side of things, right? So I think providing that kind of a touch point and ensuring that each child is getting, if not regular, then at least periodical touch point throughout the year becomes a bit of a challenge and something that we are trying to solve for. The other bit also is that in government systems, you're working on limited budgets, you're working on limited timelines. You usually don't have a Microsoft or the TCS who are coming and doing the developments at the state level. So kind of create products that are efficient, create systems that are easy to use, easy to comprehend for your last mile user, and to do it very quickly, and to do it in a manner where it can work on scale without breaking. I think that, of course, has always been a big challenge. So I think what the experiences have taught us is that all of these problems, they do seem, kind of mammoth, kind of unsurmountable, but through incremental learnings, through incremental steps in the right direction, you are ultimately heading towards a point where you're able to solve a lot of these problems. So I think challenges are there, challenges abound, but if you are able to navigate it nimbly, and if you're able to react quickly, I think then at the end, you at least have a clear path of where you want to reach towards.
Thanks both Neha and Kunal. For providing actually quite interesting insight onto the kind of challenges we face, but also why it's important and how we do work through them. I'd like to pull Amitav in now, if we can, for a second, and kind of zoom out a little bit. And I wanted to understand from you with the on a broader sense, right? The NIPUN Bharat mandate is only till 2026-27. And right now we have a lot of FLN-focused specific initiatives in this country. But with this mandate only till for a couple of more years, how relevant do you think that FLN-focused initiatives will be, say, 10 years down the line? How important will they be? How relevant will they be? And wanted to understand that.
Yeah. So I'll answer that question, and I just want to sort of also reflect on the team's work on this report in general. So let me answer that question first, Varsha. I think first and foremost, the fact that this is a mission worries me. The fact that it is a mission with an end date worries me, because this is not FLN in our country is not something that needs to have a start date and an end date. FLN in every school system is something that needs to be ongoing for every cohort of children that comes in. It needs to have the kind of rigor that a lot of states are showing. It needs to have constant iterative processes in place so that subsequent cohorts can learn from previous cohorts, and we can continue to build and become better. So the fact that it has an expiry date of 26-27 worries me. I had a conversation just recently at the launch of this report in Bhopal with a very senior ex-IAS officer, Dr. Subba Rao, who was Principal Secretary to Education in Andhra Pradesh. Now he's an advisor to CSF, and he was there right through the event. And that's one of the things I told him, is that as an advisor to an organization that is leading the advocacy around this, especially with the central government, the one thing I would push you to urge the Ministry of Education is to not put an end date to this, but to make sure that this continues to remain a priority with every state government for eternity. It has to be the number one priority, because why we are failing our children and why children are not getting into higher education, or why they're dropping out after grade 8 or grade 10 is part and parcel of what we are failing to do in early grades. And he completely agreed with me. And he said, that is something that the center needs to push for. That is something that the states need to plan for, and we need to move away from mission mode and make sure that it becomes part and parcel of what the system does. So hopefully, we'll continue to advocate, and I think that kind of leads me to this report, which I think is going to be very instrumental in demonstrating what it takes for a state like Madhya Pradesh or a Tripura or a Delhi or for Punjab or any state for that matter to make this happen, make this a reality. By 26, 27, I doubt that more than 50% of our children in grade 2 will be NIPUN. I doubt it. The numbers may speak otherwise, but if you leave it at that and say, yes, now we've figured out how to make our children NIPUN, very quickly we will sort of derail our efforts and say, हाँ हम तो अब तो सब कुछ चल रहा है, अब वापस वहां पे चले जाते हैं जहां हम 5 साल पहले थे, right? And like I say in every time I speak, is muscle memory kicks in and you default to base 0, which hasn't worked in the past, and there's no reason why it should work in the future. So I do believe reports like this need to get sent out to everybody. They need to actually be put on the table of principal secretaries of education at the center, at state levels. Education ministers need to see this. Maybe at some point in time, we should really think of translating this into different languages, if not Hindi, at least to begin with, and send it out to everybody so that they can understand, oh my God, despite all of this, even Madhya Pradesh has done so much, yet their results aren't 100% NIPUN. So, this needs to continue. So I do think we've sort of set a precedent, I think, of sorts that not only internally for TEA, and I would urge programs like SOSE, Spoken English, SOALs in Punjab, and many other of our programs to now think of pulling together this blueprint and this learnings report at the right time. Of course, it's very early for some of these programs, but I really do think we can start pulling it together, and elements of it. A blueprint typically is written up before you start a program, right? So a blueprint should be documented before you set out to doing it. And I use the analogy of making a building, right? When you make a building, what do you use it for? You design a blueprint for multiple reasons. One is you need a plan. And you need to make sure that that plan is very meticulously thought through, literally down to the last plug point that you need to put in a particular room, right? So for that reason, every program needs to have that blueprint. The second reason why you do that is you actually want visibility of the end product. When you put that blueprint in place, only then do you have a visibility that what the end product is going to look like, so that everyone can see it, right? And it becomes very clear, okay, it's going to have, these many rooms, and it's going to have these many bathrooms, and it'll have a terrace, and it'll have a drawing room, and so on and so forth. Similarly, in all the programs we run, it's important to know what the end product is going to look like. What are we going to try and achieve? So I think that's the second reason. I think the third reason that you put this report together is to track progress. Much like making a building or much like making a house, now I've laid the foundation. Now I've built 2 rooms. Now I've got 3 rooms left. And when will I have that end product in place? And will it look like what I had put in my blueprint, right? Or did I have some deviations? I think that's the third thing. The fourth thing is very, very critical, which I said at the outset. And I think one of you called out the importance of a coalition and working in a coalition and how complicated it can be. If you don't have a blueprint in place at the beginning, whether it's a coalition or not, there isn't a common understanding of what you're designing, what you're planning, and what your end product's going to look like. Everyone has a different definition of what this house you're building, right? And so if you don't have a blueprint in place at the outset, people are thinking, am I building a hut, or am I building a resort, or am I building a palace? I don't know. And everyone has different definitions, right? Because there isn't this blueprint. So I think that's also very critical. And lastly, which is what I think is more the learnings aspect that you guys have documented, is that now that this house is built, I can say, oh my God, this didn't go well. So I use that blueprint for later to dissect, right? Only if I have the blueprint. Many of you own homes or have built homes or are building homes will know that if I need to remove a wall and put a window there, I have to refer to my architectural drawing to be able to do that. because I need to know कि वहाँ पे load bearing wall है कि वो वहाँ पे वो girder लगा है कि नहीं लगा है. If you have a blueprint and you have a learnings document for your programs in place, 5 years down the road, you can dissect it. You can go back to that blueprint. You can go back to this learnings report you've written and said, oh, ये तो इन्होंने try किया था और ये नहीं चला. And इसकी वजह से हो सकता है कि इन्होंने लिखा है कि क्या हुआ. I mean, there are consulting firms today, which again, I've given you the example multiple times, that have become billion-dollar organizations solely because of the knowledge that they have been able to capture through the experiences and the projects they've run, right? And I really firmly believe that this document has set a precedent for what I think not only all our programs should do at TEA, but once you start sending this out, I do believe this is something that the entire sector should be doing. And this, for me, when I told Dhruv a couple of years ago to set up the vault internally, it was more for internal reflection, internal documentation, knowledge repository. But I think what you guys have done with the Mission Ankur Blueprint Report can possibly be our first external facing vault. And with the hope that in the next couple of years, we can get multiple organizations to start contributing to this learning. So hopefully, Varsha, that answers your question. I answered, you sort of spoke a little bit more, but wanted to capture the great work and the importance of what you guys have done through this report.
No, yeah. Thank you so much, Amitav. And I think for the next 10 minutes or so, if we can get any questions from participants now, that would be really nice. I mean, all our speakers are here and all our speakers, Amitav. Okay, so I think we have a question in the chat. Should I quickly read it out? Thinking about program design, it's evident that it is designed for effectiveness. Could you share key insights on how it has been designed for efficiency as well, which is required for scale? How cost effective is this entire learning model for a state like MP? And were there any key negotiations or compromises made to achieve this? Maybe if Kanchan wants to start off answering this one.
Yeah, sure, Varsha. No, great question, Vignesh. Thanks for that. I think the first thing, like, and just extended to what Amitav was saying, right? When you're working in such a complex program and you're working with multiple coalition partners, one of the first things that we did really early on is to just set up ground principles, right? So we said that there are 100 different ways we can go about doing, reforms in foundational learning classes, but there are certain principles we have to follow. For example, one of their principles was that we will be innovative, and we will, of course, push the boundaries, outside of what is currently being done. So to get out of the comfort zone of what is, if teacher training is happening in a certain way, we don't take it for granted. But then whatever interventions we bring in, we must make sure that they are replicable at a statewide level, right? So not do any pilots at a district level or at a school level or at a cluster level that we will then find it very difficult to replicate, right? Because in a cluster or a block, 20, 30 people, you can do a one-on-one monitoring. But when you do at a state level, you go into cascades, you get into systems and processes. So I think having that lens very early on to make sure that whatever is being designed at a statewide level, plus other design principles that we agreed to, that we will only do programs that are led by the state, right? So to get into the trap of saying that let us do it for 1 year and the second year we will hand over it to the state doesn't work, as a lot of programs I've seen in this country. So we always looked for co-ownership. We were okay to delay certain programs, certain interventions by a quarter or by a year, but we only deep dived into them after we made sure that the government had full ownership, right? And it has served us really well, because in the last 4-5 years of the journey, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through change in government, we have gone through, center giving us different guidelines from the design that we had. And if we were not in sync with the state, if the state was not owning up a lot of those design principles, then the program could have gone haywire, right? So I think just designing the program with some very fundamental principles in mind, that we will be state-led, we will co-own it with the coalition partners and the state. We will think about scale. We will think about not just intervention, but also how that intervention loop is closed. So how does it cause behavior change? How is that feedback coming back to the system? And then how does the system respond to that feedback? So just to think about interventions not in isolation, but as a complete cycle of their own, I think that really helped us make sure that we were thinking about things in a holistic manner. And I hope that when people read the report through each of the work streams that Kunal and Neha talked about, they will see that journey, that nothing was thought about as a single program or intervention, that let's change the timetable and see, but also how does that affect the teacher's behavior in class? How is that timetable change getting reflected into the teacher guides? How is that communication being made in the training? That the department is issuing a circular and is looking at how it is affecting different classes. So I think those were just some of the principles that helped us keep us on track. And of course, there were negotiations. Of course, there were compromises because we are working in a constraint of budgets, we are working in constraints of manpower. There are only so many venues available. There are only so many trainers that are available. So we had to constantly keep shuffling with those constraints that we were working in. But I think given that we had a lot of alignment with the department and literally everything that was due is co-owned, there is nothing that we are pushing the state to say that we will do it for a year and after 2 years you take it on. Because of that constant dialogue, because of a lot of time and investment made at all levels to create that relationship, to build that relationship, we were able to come up with optimal solutions here.
I can
Right.
add. Yeah. Can I add 2 points to this?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think like adding on to what Kanchan put in so beautifully, one of the ways in which we have done this is also to create this balance between bringing in what we can say innovation. Let's, for example, in some of our tech initiatives where we have brought in new systems, but balancing that with just improving effectiveness in the current systems that the department also has. And we have this very fine balance between both. For many of our work streams, what we have really worked on is just improving and building capacity in the current systems itself, which I would say is pretty cost effective. The other point on how we have worked on cost effectiveness and efficiency in general is also through structured pedagogy, which is one of our foundational foundations of the entire program of FLN and MP. If you remember, there's this report by World Bank on smart buys for global learning. And according to that report, it mentions that structured pedagogy actually falls under the good buys category, which is a very cost-effective way to really have high impact on student learning. And structured pedagogy is our basic foundation on which our entire program is based on through structured lesson plans and a very tightly knit toolkit that the teachers have and the students have of workbooks, state TLMs, teacher guides, lesson plans, along with very structured mentoring and teacher support mechanisms apart from training. All of that program is a very cost-effective way to really improve learning outcomes. So that is another way that I wanted to add.
No, thank you so much, both Neha, Kanchan. I think Vignesh, your question really incited conversation quite a bit, so that's quite good. Do we have any more participant questions right now? People can. Okay, so Aditi has sent in a question. Can you share some specific? Can you share some examples or case studies that demonstrate the potential benefits of implementing the recommendations outlined in this report? We can have anyone pick this up. Is anyone kind of ready to? What kind of strategies, recommendations outlined in this report? Where do we?
Yeah, no, I mean, might be a bit difficult to talk about specific case studies, but I think the movement, the evidence that we've been seeing is, available at a larger scale, right? At a much larger scale, rather than talking about one school or one student as a unit, right? Of course, evidences like those abounds. There are multiple success stories that we keep on documenting in terms of a student journey. But I think more important is to focus on the bigger macro level changes that we are seeing in the system itself, right? So I think talking about two specific points here, I think the first thing that we've seen changing in the system is the fact that now the decisions are being taken in a much more data-driven, much more evidence-based manner as compared to probably 10 or 15 years ago, right? Because we've been able to put in place those systems where this kind of a data is being generated and is being reviewed and monitored regularly by various stakeholders, various people in the system. Right. So I think the fact that before making any policy decision, before making any, change in the way that the things are supposed to happen on the ground, decision makers at all levels in the government are now looking at a lot of evidence, are now looking at best practices, learnings from, other states, other contexts, and informing their decisions based on that. So I think that has been, a major win for us in terms of the way that we've been able to influence decision making in the state. I think the other major learning or, kind of an achievement has also been in terms of just creating the buy-in or acceptability within the system around FLN as an important concept and the way that we are approaching the problem of FLN, right? Because usually in a government system, you hear things like it's an experimental lab, implementations and initiatives keep on coming and going. Things come for 4-5 years and then they whistle away, then they go off. But really what we've been hearing in our conversations with stakeholders, including teachers, parents, students in the past couple of years have been that, this is something that we see a lot of value in, and you should advocate for making sure, like Amitav said, that it doesn't end up being a mission and it continues as a part and parcel of the educational process in the country. So I think to see those kind of mindset shifts, that kind of upskilling, that kind of professional growth in the stakeholders that we are working with, and to be able to develop this kind of a buy-in, this kind of an acceptability for the program. I think that has been another major win for me personally and as a team. Of course, like I said, a lot of success stories, a lot of case studies around, how it has transformed a specific school, a specific teacher, specific student. But for me, more important is to focus on these macro changes, these macro developments that we've been able to bring.
Yeah, I think if Amitav wants to continue off.
Yeah, I just wanted to, not necessarily answering the question, but a point I wanted to make to push the thinking of the team, where do we go from here? And we've done a fabulous job of identifying what are the work streams that need to get delivered. But, every time I speak to people, mostly people from outside of India, they say, oh, it's so daunting. You got 1.5 million schools. Where do you even start? And, having spent 15 years trying to break this down, the more and more I've tried to break it down, I think the more I've come to terms with the fact that it's really about where does decision making lie within a state. If you take the state of Madhya Pradesh as an example, which is one of the states, most populous, number of districts, number of children, number of schools, it's really a way of dividing this down into 52 districts, which are the size of Delhi on average, right? We've got about 3,000-4,000 schools in Delhi. If you divide the number of schools in Madhya Pradesh on average, yes, give or take a few here and there, but we're talking about 52 Delhis. Now, what does that mean for decision making? Unless we are able to bring effective decision making down to the district level, you are not going to be able to sustain quality. Right? Which is why I think it is very critical that now in this next phase of, what you're calling your output stabilization, we try to build the governance structures at the district level, where it's not necessarily that a Dhanraju sir has to take a review meeting every month to ensure कि districts में हो रहा है, वो district level पे ही हो रहा है through the BEOs and the DEOs and maybe the DM. And the way where we should try and make this happen is start with the EM. Now that we've got the EM's interest in this project and he feels this is important, let's get him to help institutionalize decentralized decision making. And I do believe if you're able to crack that in the next 2 years, you will see a fundamental shift in how districts perform without necessarily having to keep a hawk eye on districts all the time. I just wanted to make that point because I'm not sure it's as much on our radar as it needs to be. We talk about governance and so on and so forth, but governance ka definition kya hai? Let's try and see if we can do this. We've spoken about district augmentation and all that, but it's really about effective decision making and empowering that DEO and that DM to drive decision making at the district level. And then you're talking about, like I said, 52 Delhis. If Delhi can do it, then any state can do it, and then the country can do it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Neha, was there something you wanted to add there, or?
Yeah, so similar to the point I made earlier, but the question just reminds me of that. So in 2019, when we started thinking about designing the program, I think Madhya Pradesh was one of the first few states in the country which thought about structured pedagogy. And at that time, really, we were relying on global evidence on why structured pedagogy works. And it was, if I can say so, was an experiment, whether in an Indian context, how well it could work. Now, 4 years later, we have results. We have feedback from the teachers, from parents, from students, from the functionaries in the system, as well as data on the learning outcomes. And all of that combined, I think, gives me that confidence and belief that structured pedagogy, if implemented well, and if contextualized to the particular geography in which it is working, it does work. And I'm hopeful that as we go along in the next couple of years as well, we are going to see incremental changes in learning outcomes, and a large part of it could be attributed to the structured pedagogy and its implementation. So that's the academic lens I wanted to bring in the entire discussion.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Maybe to close up, if we have any last question from anyone, you can drop it in the chat. If not, I think I'd like to ask everyone here, long-term members of Mission Ankur or related to it in some way, can I have maybe a sentence from everyone to close up on what they enjoy most in the time they've worked on Mission Ankur? Maybe starting with Amitav, what have you enjoyed about this, and then moving to everyone else?
Yeah, so I really think that 4 years into this program, the fact that this remains a healthy coalition and a collaborative, despite many challenges, is a testament to how we need to work as NGOs in the sector to solve large issues. And if we can stick at it and we keep doing what we're doing, again, like I said, we're setting the precedent for how we need to come together, because individually we're not strong enough. So collectively, if we can solve these big problems, then Mission Ankur is a great example of how that could be done across the nation. That's what I've enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I can go next. I think what excites me the most about Mission Ankur is simply the scale. It's one of the largest states in India in terms of even the student population. So the idea or the thought or the belief to be able to deliver something like this at that scale, 18 lakh, 1.8 million students in grades 1, 2, and 3, and maybe more, is simply daunting, but really exciting. And, that's what, keeps me going. And that's what keeps the team going as well, I guess.
I think what I really enjoyed is just working with the state leadership in Madhya Pradesh and Bhopal, with Raju sir being at the helm of it. And also working with all our stakeholders, all our partners, just really enjoy this relationship and this collaborative unit that we have been able to develop over the years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. +1 to Neha. I think the fact that the coalition approaches the program in a very collaborative manner, where we're saying we are co-creating solutions with the department and we're not coming in with an agenda, and to have people on the other end of the table who are as equally invested into the program as you are. I think that personally for me has been a very, very rewarding experience. I think the other bit has also been to see things that you're working on come to life very quickly, right? And of course, owing a lot to the support and the buy-in that the government has. Because, 6 months after you started working on a particular program or a particular mission, a particular initiative, you see it happening on the ground, right? You go to the people, you talk to them about the impact that it's making on them. So to see that quick actualization, that translation of your thoughts into action and into initiatives on ground, I think that personally for me has been very rewarding.
I think for me, it's pretty simple. What has kept me going in MA is that there's never just been a dull day. We've been working with public education systems since 2014. We've had highs and lows in all programs when there is change in, state elections, there is code of conduct, there is bureaucratic shuffling happening, which is this Mission Ankur has been one program where you've never had a dull day, whether it's internal collation dynamics, whether it is working with the State Department. And that just goes to prove that so many stakeholders have been behind getting the program to where it is today. And just the fact that the kind of political salience we have on Mission Ankur and the kind of absolutely outstanding, brilliant bureaucratic leadership we've been able to get in Mission Ankur, right from day one to now having Rashmi ma'am and Dhanraju sir, is just the whole reason the program is where it is, right? So just the fact that this program has gone through various shapes, has taken a lot of turns, but there's never been a downward trend. There's never been a loss of inertia or energy at any stakeholder at any level, has just made this the most exciting project that I've ever been a part of.
Sorry, Varsha, you said one sentence per person, but I'm coming again. So all said, agree with all the points, but one thing that goes without saying, and I just want to add, I think one major thing that I've really enjoyed is also just the TA team that works on MA. And we've had many people be a part of us. And I think the kind of enjoyable, thought-provoking team members and the experiences that we've had has been really, really enjoyable as well as a learning experience. So I think that is one of the most important aspects.
I think, yeah, I can definitely mirror that. We all feel that as well. And on that, lovely note, I think we'll close this today. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. Thank you to all the speakers for, taking out the time. And yeah.
Thank you, Varsha, for all the
Thanks,
questions.
Varsha.
Thanks. That was really enjoyable. Thanks, Varsha.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.